Whew, entrepreneurial leadership. I feel like that's a whole mouthful because
Right.
it tends to mean different things to different people. But to me, I feel like entrepreneurial leadership basically it starts with taking an initiator because let's face it, everyone identifies problem. So there's nothing amusing about identifying problems.
Yeah, there's nothing new under the sun.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. So after you identify a problem, what do you then do about that?
So last week we talked about entrepreneurship, and this week we're going to be talking about social innovation and education with my guest Rukudzo Nyoka. This is the AOU podcast, Entrepreneur Leadership in Africa. So my guest today, guys, women in power, boss ladies, all right, the CEO of Mtabe. It's gone ahead to win multiple global awards. Wow, accolades, accolades. In barely 2 to 3 years since inception and tackling major African challenges within education, the industry of education. So today we're going to be focusing on the finances and the growth of startups and entrepreneurial organizations, social innovation, and the steps that it takes to step back and resolve complex social issues in society. Putting in mind creating like impact and addition to financial sustainability. So my guest today is going to introduce herself. I'm really excited about this episode and I want to see the gems that she's about to drop. And yeah, let's hear about who you are, what you do, and what entrepreneurial leadership means to you.
Okay, so my name is Rukudzo Nyoka. I'm from Zimbabwe. And I think this is a cliche, but I'm an entrepreneur by accident. I didn't see myself here.
I've not heard of that before.
So basically, I grew up in a small township in the second largest city of Zimbabwe in Bulawayo. So that's where I essentially fell in love with education because I essentially transitioned from a private school to a government school. I think people who understand the Zimbabwean context know like the stark contrast between
Right.
public and private. So, when you're within a private setting, you get to get a little bit more comfortable and you're not really exposed to the realities of like the education sector in Zim.
Right.
So, when I moved to public school, fortunately, I was elected into junior parliament.
Right.
And then a little later on, I was appointed as the junior minister of higher tertiary education, science, and tech.
Wow, girl.
So-
Boss lady.
That's when my whole love for education began.
Right.
After that, I then went on to work into sexual reproductive health work because for me, I was still trying to search on like, okay, what are like the root cause problems of why particularly women are not accessing education?
Right.
So we started going to grassroots level, working with a number of NGOs like Transparency International and the Girls Legacy.
Right.
So I was focusing mainly on civic engagement, youth empowerment, and sexual reproductive health. And then voila, came to ALU, met my co-founder, and we started Mtabe.
How old were you when you started all this junior parliament?
So junior parliament was elected when I was 17. Yeah, I was just doing my lower six, which is like
Okay.
Form 5.
Right.
Yeah, so that's when I was in junior parliament.
All right. So tell us what entrepreneurial leadership means to you.
Whew, entrepreneurial leadership. I feel like that's a whole mouthful because
Right.
it tends to mean different things to different people. But to me, I feel like entrepreneurial leadership basically it starts with taking an initiator because let's face it, everyone identifies problem. So there's nothing amusing about identifying problems.
Yeah, there's nothing new under the sun.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. So after you identify a problem, what do you then do about that? So it could be anyone. It doesn't have to be starting a business. But the fact that you've decided to do something about it, step out of your comfort zone and take a step forward to do something about that, that's an act of leadership. So like I think in the basest form, that's what entrepreneurial leadership to me means.
All right. All
Yeah.
right. So you are the COO of Mtabe, and I will not downplay it because that's a very big step that you took. That was a lot of initiative. That was a lot of bravery as
Yes,
well.
yes.
And not only because you're a woman, but also because not a lot of people sit down, conceptualize, see how that thing is going to come to life, and actually nurture it into something successful. a lot of times it's just initialization, and then after that
it's nothing. Yeah.
well, we did not get the money after that, so we'll have to shut down and recalibrate, and they never get to recalibrate.
Yeah.
So considering that Mtabe is something that has to do with social innovation, specifically with education, how did it come about, and how does social innovation, what makes you so passionate about it?
Okay, so I can give a bit of background with how Mtabe came about.
Right.
So my co-founder, he's worked in the education space for close to 6 to 7 years now, and he had another a social innovation called Myelimu.
Okay.
So basically, Myelimu is like a discussion platform where students from across the world just come and get to discuss, educational content on the platform.
Right.
So Myelimu had a chat board incepted in it. So that chatbot was essentially for like customer service if you cannot log in, or maybe you're having troubles starting a conversation with a friend.
Right.
But instead, what students would do, they would ask questions on that chatbot,
Like how to do their homework or something.
how to do
of the
their
sort.
homework, or please explain plate tectonics.
Right.
And then we realized, wow, what students really want are answers, right? The efficiency of being able to get answers instantly.
Right.
So my co-founder, his name is Given. So he's very good with computer science. And we will talk about this business, and basically I was the person who would give feedback.
Okay.
So he's like, hey, you realize what students want are answers, right? What if we create a product that would actually help them and give them those answers? So basically, he was just pitching the idea to me, and I was like critiquing it. I was basically playing the devil's advocate, and that
you just
landed
kept
me a
asking
job.
questions and more
Yes.
questions, and it's like, but how? No.
Exactly.
And then,
Weirdly, that landed me the job.
right.
Yes, so that's how we started Mtabe. And for me, what really motivated me about starting Mtabe and being part of this initiative was realizing the importance of education. I know people would immediately think of Mandela's quote, like, education is the key to success, right?
Right. Yeah.
So when I've lived in a very low income settlement, and I think I'm one of the many people who really appreciate the impact of education.
Right.
I've seen people's lives being transformed through education. So me working with Mtabe was helping other people attain education in the most cheapest and most accessible way possible. So to me, that meant a lot. Having to see people, change families, having to see people get transformed, essentially, that's what got me ticking.
All right. So just take us through like a process of what Mtabe does. Like once I get onto the platform, what happens next?
Okay, so Mtabe basically is a platform that provides educational content to students without internet access.
Okay.
And we use SMS and artificial intelligence.
Wow.
Yeah, so I know that's crazy. So basically what you need to do is a student basically needs to have a feature film.
Right.
And then they send a text message to our code, and then within 2-3 seconds they get the answer. So it's like you text maybe to 9, 10, 11
Right.
and say, what are the causes of the First World War? And then within 2-3 seconds, you get an answer of that question you've asked.
But I'm looking at information from such a tiny screen, because I know like a lot
Yeah,
of the
I know.
phones that don't have internet are
So
very...
what we did was
Right.
we create our own content. So we have a
Okay.
team of teachers that are certified, and our content has been checked by the Tanzania Institute of Education. So we've broken it down into chunks.
Right.
Particularly because, with SMS, it's about 180 characters. So we've broken it into very digestible chunks
Right.
so that it works on SMS. So that's essentially how it works.
All right.
Yeah.
So you're not in tech, are you?
No, I'm not.
So what pushed you there? Because I'm hearing artificial intelligence, I'm hearing SMS bots here and there. What took you there?
Essentially, I didn't see myself in tech,
Right.
but I've always been a curious person. So for me, I had to learn. It was like a
Right.
learning process. I tried HTML, didn't work out, but at least I'm now conversant in,
At least
in
you
the
know
language of
something,
tech.
right,
Yes.
yeah.
So after working on Mtabe, I realized, oh my God, like I'm falling in love with emerging technologies.
Right.
I even worked on blockchain for like a year with some partners here in Mauritius.
Right.
So for me, I realized the world is going digital. And we're looking at a continent that is vastly growing. And as a social scientist, I will tell you that it's unrealistic for Africa to think that we should go through all the processes that the other continents have gone through.
Right.
So, what are we supposed to do? We basically have to take up this technological wave, you know, and customize it to the continent
Yeah.
and provide solutions that work for our people and get ourselves on the global map.
Because no one knows your problems like an African
Exactly.
does. Yeah.
So that's why Mtabe is so cool. Why? Because at Mtabe, we believe that the ideal technology is one that people can use, have access to, and can afford. Right? Because what's the point of creating like a nice app with the best usability in a continent where approximately 30% of the people have access to internet? At the end of the day, you're not going to the grassroots level and you're not addressing the problem. So that's why I feel like technology is really important.
Right.
It's just about entrepreneurs learning how to leverage it and using the most available resources there.
I do have to ask you though, how have you created a space for young social innovators based on the fact that this is a social innovation project? So how has Mtabe what is Mtabe's social impact on this aside from educating the youngsters?
So I think our biggest social impact starts with our business model.
Right.
We're currently running a B2B business model. So we basically partner with companies, which means students don't have to pay anything.
Oh, okay.
Because looking at the kind of markets in which we operate,
Right.
sometimes it's even difficult for families to get money to put on the table.
Yeah.
And we realize that as a company, we also need to be sustainable and we need to keep running so that we keep on making impact.
Right.
So we decided, why not partner with people who are interested in education, who are equally interested in, providing impact in society. So we usually partner with companies, they pay us, and then the students get to get the platform for free. So that's the first port of call, I would say, is where we start with innovation, with social innovation and social impact.
Right.
Secondly, basically our team is made up of young people. I think the oldest person in our team could be around 29.
Can I get a job, please?
Yes, we can review your resume after this. Definitely. So we work with a lot of young people.
Right.
Because unemployment rates are high and getting a job in like big corporates is very difficult.
Yeah.
So most of the people we work with, we go to like grassroots level, because some of the people that we work with, Mtabe and MyLimu are like sister companies, and
Right.
MyLimu usually does video content. So sometimes we go and get people within the local setting, and then we get to make them make videos
Right.
of teaching content through videos. And then we get to pay the youngsters.
All right.
Yeah, so
That is absolutely awesome. And what are some of the challenges that you've experienced being a part of Mtabe?
funding.
Funding. That's all about
Yes.
the money.
It's all about the money.
Right.
So I think people who work in the education space would, education, health,
Right.
those kind of spaces, particularly as an entrepreneur, they are difficult to monetize.
Right.
Why? Because one, it's a need, and you're working within a resource constrained market. So it's very, very difficult for you to get people to pay for those products, given the fact that they're not even paying for the traditional institute.
Right. And they barely
institution.
get anything back.
They barely get anything back. That's the problem. And you'd realize that in most societies, when they are dealing with problems pertaining to education, particularly,
Right.
most families would say, okay, our children are our labor force, so we cannot take them to school because you're taking
yeah.
away our labor force. So for you to then ask them to pay on top of that is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Secondly, we're dealing with students in a continent where basically parents don't want students around phones.
True.
So
I can attest to that.
it's another thing also telling parents to pay you so that their children can spend more time on the phone.
Right.
So that's the first biggest problem that we face with funding. That's why we have to go to businesses.
Right.
And landing business clients is very difficult. We landed our first client after one and a half year of pursuing them.
Oh.
And within this year, you'll be incurring costs. You have to pay your employees, you have to
Right.
stay afloat, you have to market. So it's really, really difficult. So I think funding, particularly for startups that work in education and health,
Right.
it's very difficult to find.
That's a major challenge. Are there
Yeah.
any other challenges that you've experienced being a part of social innovative space?
Government, weirdly. So
I mean, this is Africa. Though.
yeah, not to bash any government. We love government,
Right.
but I just wish it was easier to work with government.
Right.
Because the problem with our governments most of the time is, we're young.
Yeah.
And when you're young, it's really difficult for people to listen to you because they're like, oh, you're so inexperienced.
Yeah.
What do you know?
Okay.
And most of the times, governments feel threatened. We're coming from colonial,
Times, right.
yeah. So governments tend to be really touchy. So it could be better if governments could work with entrepreneurs and be more supportive instead of like putting more regulations because, entrepreneurship is the thing right now and it's
Right.
providing solutions. Yeah.
It is, yeah. All right. What was I going to ask you once again? What do you wish you knew during your startup journey? Like the mistakes that you've made and what you wish you could have done better or could have done in the first place that you know now.
The first thing I wish I knew is to be okay with failing.
That's beautiful.
It's totally okay to fail.
Not a lot of people think about that though.
I didn't think about that.
Really?
Trust me, I was stressed half the time. I cried, then I stopped crying. It's totally okay to fail. Why? Because when you fail, you get to learn a lot. That's like where all the learning outcomes are. Because if you continue being successful, you even when the success comes, you don't really enjoy it as much.
Also, at some point, Lady Luck just runs out.
Yeah, it runs out. So it's totally okay to fail. Also, when you're a startup, you need a financial advisor. I think it's very, very important. Yeah, I think it's very important because my co-founder and I, we
Right.
both didn't have a financial background. So you need somebody who helps and guides you because this is like a new terrain.
Right.
You're going to incur costs that you never saw coming.
Definitely.
So you basically need somebody who's going to be there mentoring you on how to best keep your finances in order.
Right.
Because startups, you don't have the funds, so you need to be very careful on how you handle them.
All right. So you've talked about how funding has been one of the major issues that you've experienced as being a
Yes.
social innovator. So how do you keep Mtabe sustainable?
Yeah, Mtabe, that's like really difficult.
Right.
It's all about going out there, raising more funds. I think you've seen we go and pitch a lot
Right.
because right now we are planning to scale.
Right.
We want to scale our content library to like add science subjects to make our content library a bit more holistic.
Right.
So it's all about putting yourself in spaces where you can get to meet the right people. It's also about trying to get as many connections as possible.
Building that network.
Yeah, building that network. And it could be with anyone. And honestly, I actually think entrepreneurs should start working more with government. I know it's difficult.
Yeah.
But the moment you're working with government, it makes your job easy. Also, it's all about, getting clients and marketing. You have to knock on 10 doors, at least one will open. Yeah, that's the rule.
That's a very important point. So I think we're going to be wrapping up. Any last words that you may have, any advice that you may have for a social innovator?
Oh, yeah. I mean, particularly the female innovators.
Right.
So you don't have to know anything. Just step out and be in your comfort zone. There's something really weird about the human nature.
Right.
We always feel like we cannot do something. But the moment you are in that situation, you'll be shocked at the kind of things that you do. I remember a quote by Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. She's like, if your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough.
Exactly.
It goes on to show you how the human mind is limitless.
Yeah.
It's
you can
all-
adapt to anything.
You can adapt to anything.
Right.
It's just about taking that step forward and getting into that situation, and trust me, you'll come out.
Wow. ladies and gentlemen, that was Rukudzo Nyoka, the COO of Mtabe. You're limitless, as she's just said. This has been the AOE podcast, Entrepreneurial Leadership in Africa, and we've been talking about social innovation and education. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
today.
you very much for having me.
We hope to see you sometime soon.
Definitely.
Maybe we can talk about other topics, maybe women in tech, women in business. We'll see.
Anytime.
Anyway, tune in for next week's show. We have exciting topics coming up next. We'll see you next week.